What is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Good Schmidt podcast. Finally bringing it back. I revived it and then haven't made another episode since this past September. So this is the first episode of 2024, coming here in March. No, this is not another Ariana Grande pod. That is coming, guys, don't worry. I have an album review coming. And it's not a Weekend Projects podcast because he hasn't released a new project. So I have not. I'm waiting for him to release that, so I have some more to talk about. Today is a long overdue project. I'm ranking the band Iron Maiden's studio albums from worst to best in my objective opinion. This project I've had in the works for many years. Really, I've been wanting to do this since 2017. When I was still in high school, when I started working on, that's when I started working on ranking the albums in the first place. This is just such a great undertaking, and I've lost motivation at times to work on it because it's so tough. And there's just so much information about this band I wanted to get out. And now finally, over the past week or two, I've made a push to finish making this, and I'm releasing it for you guys today. Ready to talk about it. So I hope you all enjoy it. Without further ado, let me introduce you all to the band Iron Maiden. Now, Iron Maiden are a heavy metal band founded by bassist Steve Harris on Christmas Day, 1975, in Leyton, East London. It's pretty interesting that they were founded on Christmas Day, I think. Bassist Steve Harris, the founder, had previously left his band Smiler, and according to Harris, the name Iron Maiden is attributed to a film adaptation of The Man in the Iron Mask from the novel by Alexandre Dumas, as the title reminded Harris of the Iron Maiden torture device. So that's how the band ended up getting the name Iron Maiden. And I looked up the definition of Iron Maiden, so if you guys don't know what the actual device is, it's an instrument of torture consisting of a coffin-shaped box lined with iron spikes. So that's what the band is named after. Iron Maiden is known for covering historical literature and its lyrical content, its galloping guitar riffs, thundering drums, and of course Steve Harris's thumping bass lines. In my opinion, he's the best bassist of all time. And if you've ever listened to any of their songs, such as Run to the Hills or The Number of the Beast, you'll know why. You'll hear his bass lines in there, and pretty much all of Iron Maiden's songs you hear his bass lines thumping heavy in the mix. Now, before I jump into the rankings, I just want to give you guys a little history of the band, of their lineup history. Now, I'm not going to cover their lineups prior to the debut album because they just had so many rotating members who came into the band in and out from 1975 to 1979. So I'm just going to be covering guys that actually played on the studio albums. So let's start with the very first lineup for the self-titled debut album, which was called Iron Maiden, obviously. Self-titled debut. This album came out in 1980 and was recorded in 1979. And the lineup consisted of Steve Harris, bass and backing vocals. He was the founder of the band, so really the cornerstone of this group. Paul Di'Anno was the lead vocalist. He was not the original lead vocalist. Can't remember who was the original lead vocalist, but it doesn't matter for this pod because he never actually appeared on any albums. But yeah, Paul Di'Anno, original lead vocalist. We'll get to the second and third lead vocalists that appeared on their albums in a little bit. Dave Murray on guitar. Dennis Stratton, this is the only album he appeared on. He played guitar and sang backing vocals. Clive Burr was the drummer. He's one of two drummers that have been in Iron Maiden. And sadly, he passed away in 2013. I'll get to that in a little bit. On to the next lineup change, which was Adrian Smith, guitarist, replacing Dennis Stratton, who left the band after the 1980 self-titled debut. So Adrian Smith made his debut with Iron Maiden on 1981's Killers, their second album. And the very next year, Paul Di'Anno, the original lead vocalist, was fired. From what I have read, it was because of poor stage performance and like drug and alcohol abuse. So he just wasn't being, and he had a poor work ethic because of that. So Steve Harris fired him, and in came legendary vocalist Bruce Dickinson, my favorite like male vocalist of all time. Joined the band for their third album, 1982's Number of the Beast. Again, the very next year we had another lineup change. Clive Burr was fired, and in came Nico McBrain, the current drummer of the band. He joined for 1983's Peace of Mind. Regarding Clive Burr, in an interview with Classic Rock magazine in February 2011, Clive Burr candidly discussed his split with Maiden, describing much of what had been written about the split with the band as he said it was hogwash. Clive Burr initially said he was ousted from the band after taking a break to mourn the recent death of his father. Now that seems legit enough, and he refuted claims of his departure being due to overindulgence. I have a feeling it was a combination of those things, but we'll never know for sure because sadly Clive Burr passed away in his sleep on March 12th. 2013 in London due to multiple sclerosis, if I can say that, it's hard to say, or also known as MS. He was only 56 years old. It's sad that he had MS. MS is a disabling disease, not for everybody, that affects the brain and spinal cord in the central nervous system. In MS, the immune system attacks the protective myelin sheath that covers nerve fibers and causes communication problems between your brain and the rest of your body. Eventually, the disease can cause permanent damage or deterioration of nerve fibers. I'm talking about MS here. It's making the clinician come out in me in an Iron Maiden video, but yeah, that is what MS is, and sadly, Clive Burr passed away of that. And yeah, the cause of it is really unknown. There's a number of different factors that could lead to it. Family history, smoking can also be a cause as well, and there was a bunch of other causes listed on Mayo Clinic, so if you guys want to learn more about MS, go to Mayo Clinic. It'll tell you more about that. But anyways, enough about MS, and rest in peace Clive Burr once again, who was a legendary drummer for this band. On to the next lineup change, which came on 1990's No Prayer for the Dying, which was when Adrian Smith left the band. He left during the pre-production stage, so while the album was being created, and he was replaced by Yannick Gears, new guitarist, who is actually still currently in the band. Another lineup change, this is a pretty significant one in the band's history. At the end of 1992's Fear of the Dark tour, which took place in 1993. So the album came out in 92, the tour was in 93. Bruce Dickinson left the band after the Fear of the Dark tour. He was replaced by new lead vocalist at the time, Blaze Bayley of Wolfsbane. And he was in the band for a couple of albums. And he was out of the band after Bruce Dickinson returned in 1999, prior to 2000's Brave New World album. And Adrian Smith, former guitarist, also returned to the band. And as a result, like I said, Blaze Bayley was out. Yannick Gears actually stayed in the band. They liked him so much that they decided to keep him around. So they have 3 guitar players now in Iron Maiden. They have since 2000. Actually since 1999. So along with Gears, the current lineup is made up of Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals, Adrian Smith, of course, who we just mentioned, Steve Harris, bassist and founder, guitarist Dave Murray, who's been in the band for its entire history, along with Steve Harris, and Nico McBrain on drums, form the current 6-piece lineup that fans know and love to this day. And that does it for the lineup changes and the brief history of the band in about 5 minutes. But there's so much history going into this band, and I will be discussing a lot more of it as I rank these albums. So let's start with the bottom of the list. Iron Maiden has released 17 studio albums thus far, and at number 17, after much deliberation, I selected to put 1995's The X Factor at number 17, bottom of the list. So upon revisiting this album recently, within the past couple weeks, I've concluded this is the worst and least inspired album by the band. This is also the first album without Bruce Dickinson on vocals since 1981's Killers, as Blaze Bayley, who I mentioned before of Wolfsbane, was now in the band as the lead vocalist. Now, I think the reason why this album, some of the reasons why this album was so bad is because Steve Harris was going through a divorce at the time, so he was not feeling inspired. So he was really sad, so that's probably why this album gives off a dark and somber tone to it. So I think this album was more like therapy for Steve at the time, as he was mourning his divorce, and that's probably why this album was so dark, and it just did not turn out very well at all. Many of the songs are slow and plodding. There really isn't anything notable here on this album, I don't think. And they also had a new producer, so that had something to do with the sound being the way it was. I don't like the production here by Nigel Green, the main producer, along with Steve Harris, who co-produced. Also, the other big thing that fans do not like about this album is Blaze Bayley's vocals, and I tend to agree. I do agree that his vocally does not fit this band. His voice just is not strong enough to hold up to the songs he's singing, in my opinion. And I don't think that's necessarily his fault, because these songs are really dark and they're really like weak and vulnerable. And that's just where Steve Harris was at the time. The rest of the band just went along with that. But yeah, just really not any notable really not any notable songs on here. The only ones that are kind of decent, I would say, are Signs of the Cross isn't the worst thing ever. Now, there's Lord of the Flies, based on the novel. And the last song, The Unbeliever, is not horrible, but it's not good either. The rest of the songs are very forgettable. Yeah, this album's not worth returning to after a couple listens. Yeah, bottom of the list, The X Factor. And sadly, second from the bottom at number 16 is the second and final album with Blaze Bayley on vocals, Virtual 11, released in 1998. I guess it's a soccer or football reference. I don't understand it because I'm not British. I'm American, but yeah, if you're British, you probably understand the Virtual 11 reference. And yeah, thank the Lord, this was it for Blaze Bayley. He just did not work out with this band. The final album, Nigel Green helped produce, along with Steve Harris. The production, I think, is improved from X Factor on here, but it's still not good. The one silver lining of this record is The Klansman. It is a classic Maiden song, and it sounds way better when Bruce sings it live rather than Blaze. Sorry, Blaze. You just never were a fit for Maiden to begin with. Future Real is a decent song, and I actually think Blaze's vocals are solid on here. I kind of like his vocals on Future Real. So it gets off to a decent start, but this album falls off the rails already on The Angel and the Gambler. Super repetitive and long song, and it sounds a lot like a Who song, which I just didn't really like. Not a fan of that. And then this album closed. I'm not going to talk about any of the other songs on here because they're bad, other than Como Estas Amigos, which is okay. It's not awful. And other than that, there's nothing to write home about Virtual 11. The only reason I'm ranking it higher than the X Factor is it sounds more inspired and upbeat. And that's just my preference. If you want to listen to a sad, depressing album, listen to X Factor. But yeah, this one is not sad, depressing, or dark. It's just bad. And I think I kind of mentioned this already. Blaze's vocals are improved. And I did say this, that he's not a good fit for the band. I'm glad he left, and also glad the 90s era of the band is over, and it really turns around from here. And speaking of 90s era of Maiden, this is where things started to fall off the rails as Maiden went into a tailspin, with number 15 on my list, No Prayer for the Dying, released in 1990. This album was not good at all. For a long time, I thought it was the worst Maiden album in my opinion, but I changed my opinion, obviously. What I don't like about this one is it's more plodding and hard rock sounding, which I just don't think fit Iron Maiden very well. Bruce Dickinson is the vocalist on here. His vocals are not good. Like, these are the worst vocals he's had, other than the next album we'll talk about. The worst has sounded vocally. He sounds almost hoarse on here on a lot of the songs, with the exception of the title track, actually. No Prayer for the Dying is an incredibly underrated hidden gem in Iron Maiden's history. I actually really love that song. That is a redeeming quality of this album. But there's a lot of bad songs on here. In particular, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter is my least favorite Maiden song. I think it's the worst song they've ever done. Terrible lyrics, lacking in substance on that song. The riffs on here are just not interesting at all. I don't like anything about that song. It just boggles my mind why this song went #1 in the UK. I don't get it. Let's see, what else about this album? The only good, to decent songs on here are the title track, which I said was amazing. I love the title track. Mother Russia is a good song to close out the album. So at least it ends on a high note. And it starts on a good note as well, with Tail Gunner, which is basically Ace's High light version of that. I'll talk about Ace's High when I get to their Power Slave album. And Holy Smoke, the second song, I would say is decent at best. But yeah, again, nothing really much else to write home about with this album, much like Virtual 11. The rest of it stinks, in my opinion. Just some more notes here about No Prayer. Hooks in You is the third song from the Charlotte the Harlot saga, which is a song from their debut album about a prostitute. It was written by Adrian Smith during the pre-production phase, but he did not play on the album, like I mentioned, because he left the band. And the reason Smith left was because he was unhappy with the musical direction the band was taking, and I completely agree. I would have left the band too if I was Adrian Smith. And yeah, I mentioned this before with when I discussed the lineup changes. Adrian Smith was replaced by Yannick Gears, who did play on this album. And I also mentioned this. This was my least favorite Iron Maiden album for a while. But there are at least some enjoyable tracks on here, like the title track, Mother Russia, and Tail Gunner. So I would definitely check out at least the title track and Mother Russia on here. Those are worth checking out. But this album as a whole is not worth listening to more than a couple times either. Okay, moving on to number 14. At number 14, I have the Book of Souls from 2015. This is Iron Maiden's longest album to date, 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 11 seconds. Bruce Dickinson was fighting throat cancer at this time. He's doing well now, as far as I know. Okay, what am I saying? Yeah, Bruce was fighting throat cancer at this time. He's not anymore, thankfully. And that's why his vocals are not very good on this album. He struggled to sing. I would still say they're decent. He sounds decent vocally, but he was struggling with his throat cancer. I feel bad, listening to this album, hearing Bruce sing, and just thinking about the fact that he was going through throat cancer. I just can't even imagine. So that knocks the album, unfortunately. Luckily, Bruce treated his cancer. This album was recorded at a studio in Paris that I don't feel like reading off, from September to December 2014, but they did not release the album until September 4th, 2015. This album features the band's longest song in their history, Empire of the Clouds, at 18 minutes. There's some cool moments on that song, but I'm not a big fan of it. I think it overstays its welcome, much like the whole album. I think all of the Book of Souls just feels clunky, and I think it's a chore to listen to. There's not too many memorable riffs or instrumental parts, and I mentioned this before. Last time I'm going to mention it. Bruce's vocals were rough. However, there are several songs I enjoyed on here. Shadows in the Valley was probably my favorite on the album. That was a good one. Some biblical vocals and some good playing instrument. It's some good riffs on that song. The Man of Sorrows and The Great Unknown are also some pretty decent songs too. So I would definitely check out those three, especially Shadows in the Valley. I think is a good song. And this is Iron Maiden's first collective use of drop D tuning on the album. So that's something interesting to note. So just overall in summation here about the Book of Souls, I don't like this album. I would not recommend listening to it very often. However, it has a few decent songs that I mentioned. worth listening to, and also it does have a nice live feel to it, but it's not amazing. It's just easily their worst album since Virtual 11, so their second worst in my opinion. At number 13, this might be a little low for some people, for big Iron Maiden fans, but I have Fear of the Dark at number 13, released in 1992. The reason I have it this low is it's just other albums I like more than this one. So, yeah, this one was the last album with Bruce Dickinson until Brave New World. From Here to Eternity is the fourth and final song from the Charlotte the Harlot saga, which was, again, a song from the debut album. That's a good song, I would say. This is the first Iron Maiden album to be produced by Steve Harris, and the last by legendary producer Martin Birch, who did pass away, actually, a few years ago in 2020. But anyways, this is the last one that Martin Birch helped produce, or that Martin Birch produced for Iron Maiden. He retired after the release of Fear of the Dark, so that's why he didn't produce any more albums for them. Bruce Dickinson left the band after Fear of the Dark, but I did not mention that he left to pursue a solo career. This is Maiden's first double album of their career, clocking in at 57 minutes. This album was more experimental than some of their previous albums. It's more hard rock sounding than metal at times. I think it works here more so than it does on No Prayer for the Dying. Songs like Be Quicker, Be Quicker, Be Dead, the first song on the album, to open it up, is heavier. It's more of a thrash metal kind of sounding song. So the album kicks off with a strong start there. Wasting Love's a power ballad, something the group had never done. It's a pretty solid song. Afraid to Shoot Strangers is one of the better songs on here. It was written by Steve Harris. It is about a point of view of a soldier from the Gulf War. It has been one of the only constant songs in the band's set list over the years, along with the title track Fear the Dark, which is a fan favorite for many. 2005 was the exception, though, for both these songs, because the band only played songs from their first 4 albums on that tour. Another interesting song on this record is Fear is the Key. It's about fear in sexual relationships resulting from AIDS, and this song kind of was spurned on as a result of Queen singer Freddie Mercury's passing from AIDS in 1991. There's a line in the song that references Freddie Mercury, which states, "Nobody cares till somebody famous dies," end quote. This is definitely true, because the disease affects homosexuals and drug addicts, and people generally don't care about these people, sadly, and they all of a sudden will start to care when somebody famous like Freddie Mercury passes away. This is just a summary of I'm summarizing here an interview that Bruce Dickinson did addressing this topic for Hard Force magazine. And one last thought on this album, or one more thing. Weekend Warrior, the second to last song on the album, is about violent behavior in football, aka soccer events among spectators. Terrible song, worst song on the album. Just to wrap up my thoughts on Fear the Dark, this album's a really mixed bag. There's some strong songs like Be Quicker, Be Dead, Afraid to Shoot Strangers, Fear is the Key, Wasting Love, Judas Be My Guide's pretty good. But there's definitely some weaker ones, like Childhood's End, The Fugitive, and Weekend Warrior are not great. But really, yeah, a lot of this album is really solid to good, and this definitely is worth returning to listen to on a fair bit. At number 12, we have A Matter of Life and Death from 2006. I used to really love this album, I think mainly because it's like the themes of the album are about like war and religion, which is pretty cool. And it's not a concept album, by the way. It's because I like the lyrical content of this album. And I really loved it the first couple times I heard it. But I feel like listening to this one again, I kind of just thought it was alright in comparison to the other albums. But yeah, overall, as a piece itself, I would say it's alright, even not when compared to the other albums. Interesting note about this album is that the band played it in its entirety on tour, which is pretty cool. It was the first Maiden record to reach the top 10 on the Billboard charts in the U.S. Something I'm not like the biggest fan of with this record is Steve Harris decided not to master the album to make it sound like have a more live sound. So there's no like studio tricks on here, no post production was done at all on here. So the record sounds exactly how it sounded in the studio. No special tricks. Now I do respect. Okay, my thoughts on this are while I do respect that Maiden wants to sound like as authentic as possible. The sound does like kind of suffer. It's more hollow sounding because of like the studio that they're in, and I think they definitely the reason you master an album is to get a more fuller sound. And I would just prefer the album to be mastered. If you want to hear Maiden live, go like on tour or listen to a live album where they don't master that. Like Maiden, here's my opinion: master your albums because then you get a more like fuller sound and it sounds crisper. But I'm saying master the studio albums, but don't master the live albums because then then you get the live effect on there. Yeah, that doesn't make sense for me from Steve Harris. I get why he did it, but it's not the way I would have gone about it. And yeah, I don't think like the hollow sound fits the vibe of the album. War and religious themes. This would have been better if it was mastered for sure. But yeah, overall this is a good album. It's all right. And it's worth listening to. I should mention some songs I would recommend on here. These Colors Don't Run is awesome. The Pilgrim, The Longest Day are really cool. And I also really like the Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg. That's probably my favorite on here. So definitely I would check that one out. If you don't check out any of the other ones, check out the Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg. At number 11, I have Iron Maiden's most recent album, released in 2021 in September, Sanjetsu. I was really stoked when this album came out because I did not expect Maiden to release another album after Book of Souls. I thought they were going to be done releasing studio albums, but they released Sanjetsu, so I was excited. This was their first album in 6 years. It's the longest gap between studio album releases in Iron Maiden's career. Like Book of Souls, it's a double album. And I'd say it executes a lot better than Book of Souls. The songs are well written and don't meander too much. And yeah, overall, this is an enjoyable album to listen to. Note on this one is there's no songwriting credits from Dave Murray. He hadn't had a songwriting credit since Power Slave, so that's interesting. And the title Sanjetsu is a reference. Is Japanese for tactics. A common theme about this album is doom, not a concept album. That's just the overarching theme here on Sanjetsu. I think this record overall is pretty epic, not gonna lie, but doesn't quite reach the levels of any of the records. I would say in like the top 8 or so. Those are like god tier albums. And 10. It's like this album, the next one, and the one after, and a couple after that are very good, but they're not like god tier in my opinion. But yeah, going back to this one, I still think Sanjetsu is a strong release. It just doesn't quite reach the top 10 because of how stacked Iron Maiden's catalog is. Now, songs worth checking out. Writing on the Wall is awesome. That was the first song I heard on this album. It left a strong impression of me on the whole. Really like that song. The opening track, the title track, is good. Time Machine is really cool. Darkest Hour is a song about Omaha Beach. That's a really cool song. I also really like Death of the Celts and Hell on Earth. Those were some long, epic songs by Maiden, both written by Steve Harris and are 10 plus minutes long. So if you want an epic long song, listen to Hell on Earth or Death of the Celts, or both. And like shorter song. If you want a shorter song on here, Writing on the Wall and Time Machine are also really solid. So Sanjetsu coming in at 11. On to the top 10. This was extremely tough, but at number 10 is The Final Frontier, released in 2010. I didn't rank this ahead of Sanjetsu upon listening again. Really liked it. And funny enough, this was actually rumored to be the band's last album. Because of the title, The Final Frontier. But they ended up releasing The Book of Souls. As far as the themes on this album, They are exploration, expectation, and discovery. Mainly what themes are on here. Again, not a concept album. This is the third longest Iron Maiden release, an hour and 16 minutes long, trailing only Book of Souls and Senjutsu. This is their final album to be released through EMI Records, ending the band's 30-year relationship with them. This is the band's fourth album to reach #1 on the UK Albums charts. The others were Number of the Beast, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and Fear of the Dark. This one reached #4 on the Billboard charts, the highest placement at that point, and it would be topped by Senjutsu at #3 in 2021. The song El Dorado is the only single from this album, and it won a Grammy for Best Metal Performance. That was the band's first and only Grammy, I believe. Could be wrong. So that's interesting. El Dorado is an awesome song, by the way. And in an interview, Bruce Dickinson spoke to Classic Rock, a British rock magazine, in June of 2010 regarding The Final Frontier. Bruce said, quote, this one is probably the greatest departure from our sound. It's been happening incrementally since Brave New World. That's great, after doing it all for so long, to still be figuring stuff out. We could just be bored by it, but we're obviously not. So, that's interesting. That's how Bruce feels about it, and I kind of feel that way too. Like, each album since he returned to the band in 1999 has, like, their sound has incrementally shifted a little bit, and it kind of came to a head on this album. And, yeah, it turned out really well. First song on here was a two-part song, Satellite 15 and The Final Frontier. Epic song. Coming Home is a really good song. I like The Alchemist, Isle of Avalon, Starblind, and The Talisman are all really good songs. When the Wild Wind Blows is not bad per se, but I'm not a big fan of it. Song to wrap up the album. But like the beginning and middle of this album are really strong for sure. Definitely recommend checking this one out if you want to hear a album from the 2010s. From Maiden that's epic. This is the one. Even more so than Senjutsu. Check this one out. Or I mean more so than the Book of Souls. I would check this one out. Coming in at #9, I've got the debut Iron Maiden, released in 1980. It was recorded in December of 97, released April 14th, 1980. So we're coming up on the anniversary of this record. And I mentioned the lineup before, but I'll just repeat it again. On this one it was Steve Harris on bass, Dave Murray on guitar, Dennis Stratton on guitar, Paul Di'Anno lead vocals, and Clive Burr on drums. Interesting fact here about Dennis Stratton. He was an occasional lead vocalist for the new wave of British heavy metal band Praying Mantis. If you ever heard of them, go check them out. Their first record is awesome. Praying Mantis, that is. Derek Riggs, a British artist, created Eddie, the famous mascot featured on this album and all of Iron Maiden's records. Really epic mascot. Probably the most well-known mascot in metal and rock history would be Eddie. The title track explains what an Iron Maiden is and what the band is all about, which is cool. And honestly, truth be told, I enjoy every song on here. However, the album suffers from Will Malone's poor production, but I can get past it. This is a really good album. Sadly, the production dates this album to sounding like it's from 1980, and there's nothing wrong with that. From 79-80. I've been mentioning this song the whole time. Charlotte the Harlot is the first of 4 songs by the band about a fictional prostitute. According to Dave Murray, who wrote the song, it is based on a true story, so that's interesting. This debut is a heck of a way to kick off Iron Maiden's career, and it's only up from here. They get a lot better from here. And speaking from here, we have Killers at #8, released in 1981, their second album. Final one to release to feature Paul Di'Anno on lead vocals, who was fired from the band due to on-stage issues and problems with drinking and cocaine use, and obviously those affected his stage performance. And this is the last punky sounding Maiden album. I didn't mention that, but the debut and this album sounded really punky. So it's interesting that they have this little punk era going on. And then they go to the Galloping era after this, and then kind of got a more like hard rock era in the 90s, and then they slowly shift towards the progressive metal era that they're in today, from in Brave New World to today. So they've had different chunks of their career where they've changed their sound. And this was the end of the first like chunk where they sounded punky. Adrian Smith, punk meaning like punk like the rock genre. Adrian Smith joined the fold on this album. He sounds great on here. This is the first Iron Maiden album to be produced by legendary producer Martin Birch, who, like I mentioned before, passed away in 2020. Legendary producer. He would go on to produce their next 8 albums, including 1992's Fear of the Dark, which I already talked about. Highlight tracks on here for me on Killers are Ides of March and Genghis Khan. And this is funny enough. This is the only album to feature 2 Iron Maiden instrumental tracks. Murders in the Rue Morgue is an amazing song. Love that one. So is the title track Killers. The back half of the album is also pretty solid too, with Prodigal Son, Purgatory, and Drifter. Murders in the Rue Morgue is based on the Edgar Allan Poe story by the same name, and Prodigal Son was written prior to the release of Maiden's debut album. Killers is definitely has highlights Iron Maiden's early sound best, especially on like Murders of the Rue Morgue and Genghis Khan. Those ones I'd recommend. I'm not a big fan of Wrathchild, but it's a good song and it highlights their sound pretty well. Another one song I didn't mention was Innocent Exile. That's a good song as well. So coming in at number 8 once again, Killers from 1981. Fast forwarding here to the year 2000 for our number 7 entry on my list is Brave New World. This was Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson's return to the band in 1999 prior to the album's release. First album of Iron Maiden's to feature 3 guitarists in Dave Murray, Yannick Gears, and Adrian Smith. To me, this is one of the best comeback albums of all time, if not the best. It's awesome. The title and the record references Aldous Huxley's novel by the same name. I did read the book, and it was alright. This album is better than the book. The Wicker Man kicks off this album strong. Dream of Mirrors, Blood Brothers, and Out of the Silent Planet are also great tracks on here. I didn't realize this till doing research about this album. There's some leftover tracks here from the previous album, Virtual 11. Adrian Smith revealed in an interview with Kevin Lomax for Sanctuary London in 2003 that the Nomad, Dream of Mirrors, and The Mercenary, which is probably the worst song on this album, in my opinion, and other people's opinions, or at least the article that I was reading said, were written during the Virtual 11 sessions. Smith said there was a fourth track, reused track, but he doesn't remember which one. Former lead singer Blaze Bayley claimed in a different interview with Kevin Lomax in Istanbul before his performance in Rock the Nations that he had written some of the lyrics for Dream of Mirrors, but he wasn't credited by Steve Harris in Brave New World. That's unfortunate. I don't think Blaze would lie about that. Maybe though. Not sure. Another note that I didn't find in my research, but just from listening to this track, The Thin Line Between Love and Hate, Nico McBrain says, "I effing missed it" at the end, referring to a drum part. I think it refers to this in the liner notes if you buy the album. Talks about that, but that's an interesting fact that he noticed he missed a drum part after he missed it. I really do enjoy Brave New World a lot, but it is flawed. It's repetitive and oblong. Those are really the only weaknesses I would say here. I feel like some of these songs tend to border on overstaying their welcome, and that was a problem with Virtual 11. Obviously, that seems to be a problem here. Really the only problem. This album feels drawn out and bloated at times, especially the last song. They could have cut like half of the last song out, and it would have been great. That being said, this is still classic Maiden material. That's hence why I put it at 7. It just doesn't quite enter 80s Maiden territory, but still very good. And I put it Brave New World at number 7. At number 6, I have an album that has grown on me over time in 2003's Dance of Death. This is a fabulous album to me. Maiden In my opinion, Maiden perfected their 2000s era prog metal sound on this record with Yannick Gears in the fold, along with the rest of the band. This album just sounds phenomenal. Dance of Death expands upon what Brave New World did, feeling more cohesive and less repetitive than it, but still repetitive. Not terrible. The songs don't overstay their welcome on here, like I felt like on Brave New World, and I find that to be a gripe with Brave New World, but not on here. To me, the magnum opus track on here is Passchendaele. It is about a real military battle, called the Battle of Passchendaele. It's spelled differently, Passchendaele. They changed the spelling of the title to Passchendale. I think so they don't get sued. Now, the real Battle of Passchendaele took place at Ypres Salient in Belgium during World War I. The Allies fought against the German Empire on the Western Front from July 1917 to November 1917. You guys probably didn't think you were getting war history today, but if you know Maiden, you're getting war history. Adrian Smith wrote this song. In fact, this is the only Iron Maiden album to date where every member has writing credits. I don't think that's true, actually, but yeah, every member has writing credits. Nico McBrain has a credit on New Frontier, which expresses his view on human cloning. McBrain, a born-again Christian who believes that only God can create a human with a soul, said that, quote, when man attempts to make man, then it's a monster in a test tube, quote. And this is from Mick Wall's Run to the Hill biography. Iron Maiden Run to the Hills biography. I'm going to be referencing that biography a lot in this one. As far as Nico's opinion here, I agree, man. You can't create a human soul. It's just not the same, man. And creating a monster in a test tube, he said it well. Yannick Gears wrote the title track, Dance of Death. It's inspired from the final scene from Ingmar Bergman's film The Seventh Seal, which is set during the Black Death in Denmark. The movie tells the story of a medieval knight playing a game of chess against the personification of death. The last scene of the song is based on figures that are doing this dance of death, and yeah, that's really what the song is about. An interesting song I find interesting on here is Face in the Sand. It's about the media coverage surrounding the Iraq War, which is going on at this time. Bruce Dickinson said that all empires eventually fade away, which is true. Hence why they use like desert sand in Iraq as kind of like a metaphor for like empires fading away. You get the sense when that sense when you're listening to this song. Face in the Sand is the only Iron Maiden song that Nico McBrain uses a double bass pedal, and I'll put a picture up of a double bass pedal on the screen so you guys can see what it looks like. The final song, Journeyman, is the only acoustic song Iron Maiden has ever done, which is quite interesting. According to Bruce Dickinson on Death on the Road live album, he said Journeyman is about, quote, the whole process of writing and being a musician. The band originally recorded the song with electric instruments, but decided to switch it to acoustic to give the listener a break from the intense songs preceding it, and this album is very intense until Journeyman. I think this was a smart move for the band, as this was a beautiful way to close the album. The original version of this song is featured on the No More Lies EP. I haven't listened to that. You guys definitely can, and I probably will. And yeah, Dance of Death, like I said, has grown on me. This is a fabulous and epic album. If you want something after 2000 of Iron Maiden to listen to, this is a good one, along with Brave New World. Okay, we're entering the top 5. Coming in at number 5 is the classic album, The Number of the Beast, released in 1982. This is one most people know because of the title track. Controversial, obviously, because of the 666. But this song is not about devil worship. You can go listen to interviews from the band. It's definitely not about devil worship. And then Yeah, that's the main like famous song on here, along with "Hallowed Be Thy Name," the best closer in the band's history. This is the first Iron Maiden album I ever heard, so it holds a special place in my heart for that. "Run to the Hills" is a classic on here. That's really the only song gets radio play in America. That got and gets radio play in America. "Run to the Hills," "Hallowed Be Thy Name," and the title track. Other songs I love on here are "The Prisoner," right around Halloween time. "Children of the Damned," which is based on a book, The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. It is about an English village where all the women become pregnant with parasitic aliens. The book spawned 2 films based off of it, "The Village of the Damned" and "The Children of the Damned," the sequel, which the song also takes inspiration from. Another song I really enjoy on here is 22 Acacia Avenue. It's the second song from the heavily referenced Charlotte the Harlot saga that I keep referencing. This song was written by guitarist Adrian Smith and his old band Urchin several years prior to this album's recording. The only weak spot on here is Gangland. Not a good song. I really wish Maiden would have included the B-side that they had on this album, Total Eclipse, in the original release instead. Fits the mood a lot better than Gangland does on this record. And I mentioned this earlier, but Bruce Dickinson joined the band as the lead singer on this album. Interesting facts here. Bruce had contractual issues with his former band Samson, so he couldn't have any writing credits on here. This was the last album to feature Clive Burr on drums. One more interesting fact here about this classic album is the background of the album cover. I have it up, but it originally is supposed to be black, so I have the original cover up. It's supposed to be black and gray, but there's a blue misprint in circulation, and actually I've seen it before, like in real life. A dad from one of the scouts in my former scout troop had the one with the blue misprint on it. It looks pretty cool. Like, both covers look epic, but yeah, the original is obviously the most epic cover, and this album is super epic. I have nothing more to say about it. Go listen to it. It is awesome, and I wouldn't be mad if you have this one or any of my other top 4 at number 1. It's a phenomenal album. And speaking of that, leave your Iron Maiden albums ranked in the comments. I'd like to see them. I wouldn't be mad in whatever order you put them. Just don't put like the Blaze Bayley albums in the top 5. But really, I would say everything from 11 to the top is pretty interchangeable, and then like 12 to the bottom is also interchangeable with itself. But anyways, let's continue on with the list. Number 4, another classic 80s album, 1983's Peace of Mind. This was the first album to feature Nico McBrain on drums. Classic songs on here are The Trooper, Revelations, and Flight of Icarus. Songs are phenomenal. Love them. Die With Your Boots On is fun as well. Still Life, Quest for Fire, and Sun and Steel are really the only weak songs on here, but they're still good. Another song I want to talk about on here is To Tame a Land. It's based on the sci-fi novel Dune, and the movie. Actually, speaking of Dune, I just saw part 1 and part 2 of the Dune movies. Definitely go check those out if you haven't. That's what this song is based on. It's based on the novel Dune and the movie, the original 1984 movie. But this is more so it's based off of Frank Herbert's Dune series, who is the author. Maiden was forced to change the name of To Tame a Land, or forced to change this song to be called To Tame a Land instead of Dune, because Frank Herbert, the author of the books, doesn't like heavy metal, and he would have sued the band if they didn't change the name of the song. So they had to change the name, because Frank Herbert doesn't like heavy metal. Why did he have to hate? And I found that out from Mick Wall's Run to the Hills Iron Maiden biography, which I referenced before. Another interesting fact is this is the first of 3 albums up to 1986 by the band to be recorded at the Bahamas. In the Bahamas at Compass Point Studios. I wonder what was in the water there in the Bahamas, because Iron Maiden created some magic and a classic album in Peace of Mind here. At number 3, we have the next album, which is even more classic. 1984's Power Slave. Again, this one could be at number 1, and it is for some people. I wouldn't be mad, but I have it at 3, since I prefer 2 other albums ahead of this. Yeah, again, classic Maiden. This album is the reason they became international superstars on their tour for this album. Really well-known, famous tour. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, the closing track on here, is an incredibly epic song. It's really the standout of the album. It's based on Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem by the same name. Here's some direct quotes from the poem in the song. Water, water everywhere, not any drop to drink. So that's a direct quote there from the song. And the poem and the song is based off of like a sailor's tale, which is pretty cool. Other notable songs on here: Flash of the Blade, awesome riffs. Aces High, which I mentioned before, is about flying. And 2 Minutes to Midnight, also a super epic song. Really get my adrenaline pumping when I listen to them. And the title track, Power Slave, has amazing solos as well. Every song is fantastic on here. Highly recommend this album. Alright, we're in the top 2 now, and I can understand if you don't have this album at 2, but I really love this album. It's one I listened to throughout high school, still listen to now to this day, every now and again. 1986 is somewhere in time. I would say, in my opinion, this is the most overlooked 80s classic era Iron Maiden album, partially due to the synths and lack of Bruce Dickinson writing credits. I think that's why it's overlooked. Yes, they were burnt out from their famous World Slavery Tour in support of Power Slave in 1984 and 5, but this album is still a classic. It is classic. Great songwriting by Steve Harris and Bruce Dickinson on Wasted Years. It's about, like, living in the moment in your life. Yeah, soaking everything in. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner is based on the novel by Alan Silito about a cross-country runner who refused to win a race because the governor told him to. I have the novel. It's more of a short story. I recommend the song and the novel. They're both awesome. The drum sound on here from Nico McBrain sounds like footsteps of someone running. Definitely fitting for the song. I love all the songs on here. Also, and the closer. Alexander the Great, about Alexander the Great, is phenomenal. Love it. Yeah, Somewhere in Time, from 1986, at number 2. And the number 1 Iron Maiden album, in my opinion, is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son from 1988. If you guys have known me for a while, I am absolutely in love with this album. I've been in love with it since 2017. Made me a huge fan of the band, and this is a concept album based on the novel Seventh Son by Orson Scott Card. Concept's really interesting. It's about a mythical figure with paranormal gifts, so that's pretty interesting. The first song, Moonchild, goes. I don't want to get copyright strikes for this, but it's Maiden's music. But their song, Bruce Dickinson has a spoken word part where he goes like 7 deadly sins, 7 ways to win, 7 iron burning fires, 7 your desires. So everything is about like these 7 sons with paranormal gifts, or this figure that has like 7 sons with paranormal gifts. So that's interesting. And yay, Bruce Dickinson had writing credits again on this album. The songs he had credits on were Moonchild, Can I Play With Madness, The Evil That Men Do, and Only the Good Die Young. There were synths on this album, but they were done using keyboards rather than bass and guitar synthesizers on the previous album, Somewhere in Time. It sounds way better, for sure. It's an improvement. The sound on here sonically is the best sounding Maiden record. It sounds so like crystal clear and amazing, and the production by Martin Birch is like the best production on any album ever released, in my opinion. This album is Iron Maiden's like first truly progressive metal album, in my opinion, and they went more that route after from Brave New World onward, which I'm glad they did. And this album just flows super well and is super cohesive. It's like listening to an audiobook. It is phenomenal. Again, their first album to feature keyboards. The last one had guitar and bass synths, not keyboards. This is the last album with guitarist Adrian Smith until he returned in 1999. And founder Steve Harris, his thoughts on this album, to close it out. Quote from Steve Harris: "I thought it was the best album we did since Peace of Mind." Interesting. I loved it because it was more progressive. I thought the keyboards really fit in brilliantly. Because that's the influences I grew up with. I was so pissed off with the Americans because they didn't really seem to accept it. Well, I did. I love this album. Everyone said afterwards that it was a European-sounding album. I'm not so sure about that. What's a European-sounding album? To me, it's just a Maiden-sounding album, man. It is. And again, this quote from Steve Harris comes from his Iron Maiden Run to the Hills biography. Yeah, I have really nothing more to say about this album. All of the songs are phenomenal, from Moonchild to Only the Good Die Young. Every song in between, amazing. Infinite Dreams, Can I Play with Madness, The Evil That Men Do, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, The Prophecy, Clairvoyant, which is probably my favorite on here. I love Clairvoyant. Yeah, just so epic. I have nothing more to say about this album. And that is going to conclude this my Iron Maiden albums ranked. Thank you all for watching or listening to this. I hope you enjoy it sincerely from the bottom of my heart. I put a lot of time and effort into listening to these songs over the years, and yeah, putting together this list. Lots of racking my brain where to put which album where. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, to be honest. Alright, going on a side note now. You guys probably expected me to release my Ariana Grande Eternal Sunshine album review. It is coming later this month, hopefully the last week of March. I'm shooting to get it out before Easter, if all goes well. Also, I believe I mentioned this earlier in the video, but I believe in my initial Ariana Grande episode, so the last episode of the pod, I mentioned ranking The Weeknd's projects. Said this before, I haven't finished it yet because I'm waiting for his next project to release, and I will do it then once it releases. Also, I have another project in the works after Eternal Sunshine. That's down the road. But yeah, with that being said, this will wrap up this episode of the pod. Once again, this has been the Good Schmidt Podcast. My name is Nick, and I am signing out.